Let me, how do I, bear with, let me give you permission.
Okay.
Okay, that should let you know. That work?
No.
I've given you presenter rights, so you should be able to. Let me see. Strange. Yeah, if you want to email it to me, then I can pop it on. I wonder why that's not working. Oh, hang on. There's two Nickies. I've given the wrong person permission. Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
So I haven't had my coffee yet, so there you go.
Right, can everyone see that?
Yep, you're all good.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'm Nikki Williams, the Rural Development Manager for Torfaen Council. I cover lots of different rural agendas, and because of that, the food sort of resilience agenda falls under my remit. So just to begin with, obviously Hannah said, you know, we've run a number of grants over the last 3 years, really related to food. Bit of background to it for why we started. Under the EU and Welsh Government funded rural development programme, we had a sort of 4 year programme of support for food tourism, and obviously COVID hit, so we couldn't spend the money on what we wanted to do. And then we realised locally that there was lots of need around the social side of food. So we worked with Welsh Government to develop a small grant scheme to support some of our sort of larger community and third sector groups. And we had about 60k in the budget, and we needed a lot more. So that's what our little lockdown project, that's what we did as a team, was trying to draw in lots of different types of funders, and it just escalated from there. So we run 2 different types of business grants over the past few years, funded with multiple different funders, including Welsh Government. We've utilised the WLGA household grants and food poverty grant as well to add to it. And we piloted an UK funded project with the sort of pilot scheme last year through, I can't think of the name of it now, Community Renewal Scheme. We run a Food for Growth project with grants in as well. So I'll run through the different types of grants. So we have food and business grants. So the aim of that is to literally quite simply increase the amount of local produce that we have within the area. Torfaen's quite small and we don't have a huge amount of it. So we advertised in terms of what the criteria was. So as you can see, to improve access to local produce, add value to existing produce, we supported diversification. We wanted to enhance the local knowledge of local produce, connect people of all ages through celebrating local food, share skills and knowledge, and develop formal and sort of formal local and regional cooperatives. So just a few examples of the types of projects that we funded. We're getting a lot of interest from local farmers, which is really good. Most of the farms in Torfaen, we've got 63 working farms, and I'd say 10 of them are full-time. The rest are sort of hobbyists, or they run it part-time and have jobs, usually in contractors elsewhere. So a few examples: Tumbalum elderflower wine. This is run through Blaenau Farm. They set up and they gave about 3 acres, gave up about 3 acres of their field to their son, who, as you can see, is quite happy holding a nice bottle of wine. I haven't yet to taste it, so I'm not happy about that. And yeah, they planted lots of elderflower, so we worked with them in terms of the support to do online, set up a website, working with our environmental health team, making sure all the T's were crossed and I's were dotted and so forth. So quite a lengthy process. They received that funding last April, so this year will be sort of the proper first growing season that they've got with that. Then we've got Teapoith Farm. So they're the first farm that we've worked with in Torfaen that are really keen and have opened their gates to the public. They've piloted over the past sort of 2 seasons pick your own events. So you can see here at the top, he's run for the last 2 years pick your own pumpkins. He's also planted an acre of strawberries last summer, which worked really well. And we're finding we haven't had a negative response on all of our social media coverage with this, and our local communities are really loving it. And then finally, we've got Penny Park Farm, which was to diversify into bees. He had a few there, so we provided a grant to be able to escalate that. And he's working with sort of local arts and craft groups as well to do stuff with the wax and looking at the byproducts that come from the bees as well. So they all received a grant of £15,000, and that was part of our UK government's Food for Growth project. Then we run alongside it then, because, you know, the food agenda is not just economy, it's around the social side of food as well. So we also run a community food scheme. So the aim of this is to create a whole system approach to tackle food poverty and engage with wider audiences. We found that, you know, that lots of small community groups in the area, especially popping up all over the place through lockdown, but we noticed that it was a bit of a postcode lottery to what kind of support you get. Some people were slipping through the gap, other people, lots of stigma attached to it and so forth. So we wanted to provide over a sort of 3-year period some sort of revenue funding then to support them to develop links with welfare services and improve access to nutritional and affordable food. To educate young people and their families. So we've had quite lots of cooking classes and so forth. And enhance their knowledge and connect people of all ages through cooking, growing and eating. And just a few examples, we've worked with quite a large sort of third sector group called Able Radio, who've set up a side charity called Sustainable. They work with sort of young people aged school leavers aged 16 up to 25 with learning physical disabilities. It's a day centre, so we've worked with planning to enable to change the land use. So you can see here that they've planted quite some nice ground to grow, and they, on the other side, I haven't got a picture of that at the moment, they've recently purchased quite a large polytunnel to grow as well, to look at the all seasons, because our weather's not amazing. So they've put in an education programme to train the young people to learn to maintain the crops as well, and they sell there on a regular basis. Then we've got Tasty Not Wasty, which is based in a church in Cwmbran. So they work closely with our supermarkets for food waste, and this is open to all people, not just on referrals. And then we've worked with Eastern Valley Food Bank to pilot you know, why people need to access food banks in the first place, and rather than just dishing out the food, we gave them a grant to employ a part-time counsellor. So when they popped in, sort of like a life skills counsellor then, so they could make sure that they were being referred to the right areas, whether it's around finances, mental health advice, you know, education and skills and so forth. So it's to provide the whole package. So how have we done this? We developed quite a rigorous application process for our side. It's quite hard when you've got, you know, external funders, especially when it's UK government, Welsh government and the EU, because we have a mixture of package and lots of different outputs and outcomes that we need to deliver to our funders. And we wanted to make the process quite simple for our communities. You know, they don't need to know all the administration linked to it. That's our roles within the council. So we developed a 2-page EOI to make sure that the grants, whether they were community or business, were eligible to apply. So quite simple process. If eligible, then we sent out the full application, which again was about 6 pages, so not too rigorous, with clear and detailed guidance. And just a key really to say that we've provided support throughout that whole process. Some groups will run with it and they've done lots of funding before, but a lot of the smaller groups that popped up over COVID, you know, they haven't relied on funding before, and filling in a grant application form can be quite onerous task for them. So we made sure that within the team we were able to support that process. In order to have the team support them through that and to make sure that the process was quite fair, open and honest, we set up an external grants panel made up of 6 members, 2 from sort of each of the sectors, so private, public and third sector. And within the application as well, we linked all of our targets from other funders to the grants, so we can feedback, and it is a whole system approach then in terms of that. And I can't, it's stopped. Oh, there we go. So lessons learned, I felt it was important to kind of run through that. We've learned a lot, and I will say every time we've gone out for an open call for a grant, we've changed the application and the guidance. We work really closely with our community groups and our businesses and ask them, how did they find it? When we're doing the monitoring as well, obviously, we do learn as we go. So every time we do change it. So I just thought it'd be an idea to make a few kind of do's and don'ts then, really. So do take the time to engage. As I said, some people will need hand-holding throughout the whole process, and that can take up quite a bit of time. Ensure that the community groups are aware of the legislation around food, particularly around the cooking and the food waste side of it. I don't think a lot of our groups kind of knew the hygiene and so forth, with the sell-by dates and so forth. That can be quite tricky for them. And then be prescriptive in terms of the application process. So don't ask too many sort of open-ended questions, and then be flexible in the approach as well for delivery. Not all groups, especially if it's run like through the council, not all groups have the money in the bank to pay and then we give out. So how we did it was we gave a 50% grant up front. And then once we've collected all the evidence for that, then we release the second grant payment with a final monitoring visit. Do consider asking match funding from businesses, because you will find a lot of businesses think it's free money, it's difficult, and they don't necessarily provide all the investment and the time and effort that they need. Whereas if you ask for a small percentage, you're more likely to be a success, then the business more likely to be a success. So we ask for 20% match funding for ours. And then think about the time frames in terms of when you're launching the grant scheme, particularly around the growing seasons. We learned that the hard way 3 years ago. And then definitely don't estimate the time needed to support the grant recipients. It does take a lot of time, and don't underestimate the amount of administration side of it as well. We might understand what our outputs and outcomes and targets and performance indicators are, whatever we call them, but just make sure that in the application and the guidance that you don't use sort of rigorous, the terminology and so forth, that is sort of pub language, so to speak. So what are we doing next? I thought I'd just use a couple of slides just to say how we're using this partnership funding going forward. So we have in Torfaen developed a food resilience programme. We've utilised our Welsh Government partnership, food partnership funding, and linked it with our sustainable food agenda. And we've managed to I can't think of the words, share prosperity funding. We've got quite about £1 million over the next 2 years, which is really good. So we've secured that now as well. So the aim of it is to build a coordinated approach to food resilience, with the aim that services are developed cohesively to ensure service users gain access to a holistic system of support. We're looking at develop a system-based approach so that all systems capture the relevant data, and we find that's an issue for us as well, is lots of groups don't necessarily monitor and manage who's accessing the support, what the reasons are, and this means that those people are not getting the support, the longer term support that they need. And the whole aim then of the programme will encourage future sustainability, and we're obviously linking this into our food partnership and our food charter. So we've got 4 work streams within the resilience programme. So one is the community support programme, which will have another round of grants. And we're looking to support third sector groups, community groups, development of more community gardens, linking more to welfare services. And we're finding a lot of schools are asking for support as well. So we're going to be setting up a few networks for all them to not just offer the grants, but offers a support system to look at sustainable practices, resource sharing and so forth. Also we're going to be looking at we've already launched the next phase of our business support programs. We've had 5 applications in so far, or approved so far, 4 of which are for local farms, and they're all looking at food in a completely different manner, which is really interesting. And the grant criteria for that in our application, we've linked it into our Torfaen Food Charter, so we can start to manage what's going on in the community in relation to the aims and objectives within our food charter. We're also going to be looking at the development of community wealth and food hubs. So we'd like a food hub, quite a large food hub in each of our 3 anchor towns in the borough. And then linked to all of this is our partnership working and our food strategy. So last slide then. So this is our partnership approach. So we have our food partnership, which you're all doing. We'll be launching next month our Good Food Network. I think we've done it slightly different to a few other areas. So our Good Food Network is just going to cover the community and third sector organisations. And then we're going to have a separate business network. The reason we've done that is I can't get businesses to come to the meetings in the day, and I can't get the third sector to come to the meetings in the night. So we're going to have to separate it. We have, however, got people on that will sit on both, that sit on our food partnership. So we're hoping that you know, it'll be sort of a 3-way communication within that. And then underneath that, then we have our food resilience team, made up of 4 people. So you'll be the programme manager, the food partnership officer funded through the partnership funding. We've got a food development officer to work closely with the grants to make sure that they can access further funding and sustainability. And then a grants and monitoring officer to support me, because there's lots of funding and it takes a lot of administration to support all the claims. And they can help build in the work packages as well for the grant recipients. I think that's it.
Brilliant, thanks, Nikki. That was really useful, and I think some people might find that useful to see how using something like a small grant scheme actually fits into kind of the bigger picture, the bigger partnership working and everything else that's going on within, like, the food resilience team, for example, in the local authority. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a standalone activity, but it can be built into what you need, you know, in the work that you're doing, tying it into kind of bigger work streams and bigger pots of funding. So that's really, really useful. And in terms of kind of do's and don'ts for small grants, I'm sure we'll hear similar things from Chris and Sam in some aspects as well, especially around kind of the support that's needed and the administration time. What we'll do is we'll hear from Chris and Sam, and then if anybody's got any questions, we'll do questions at the end, if that's all right. But if there is anything that comes up as we're going through, just drop it in the chat, just so you know you don't forget, and then yeah, we'll cover it at the end. So we'll pass on to Chris. Let me just make you, have you got slides, Chris?
Afraid not. No.
Oh, that's all right. Great. I don't have to fiddle around trying to make you a presenter.
Yeah, I'll just spend a couple of minutes saying what we're doing. So I'm in Blaenau Gwent Food Partnership. Yeah, so for me, I suppose the value of small grants is its accessibility, its flexibility, capacity building. And for me personally, it's like a really great way for the partnership to get into the network, use it as a networking opportunity really, and sort of get buy-in for the wider work I'm doing. And like small grant funding can be a lot more appealing for smaller groups who might not be like have that confidence or even ambition to sort of get on that funding hamster wheel that so many you sort of get trapped in. So it can be a nice little easy access way for things to sort of generate activity. I suppose in my area we're really sort of conscious that we might be excluding certain demographics with the grant process. I've been part of the local authority food panel for the food poverty funding, and like when I first started, they were saying to groups, yeah, you spend the money and then we'll reimburse you. And I just couldn't believe that they expected like community groups to have like this cash in their bank account to do this. So that's changed now. But yeah, it's still you worry that you're the gatekeeper and you're just seeing the same groups come back over and over again. So I'm trying really hard to target these need to reach groups. In Blaenau Gwent, you've sort of got sort of adult literacy barriers and digital exclusion. I'm sure it's similar in all your areas. And those big online forums can be a really daunting prospect. So for our recent, we've just done a planting, like Hannah was saying at the start, plant and share grants have been like really good fun to do. And in our partnership, we've got Gavo. And so I spoke to them about how can we create a really a guidance process which is really isn't very onerous. So we used the template from the National Lottery Community Fund for small grants. And that was something like, do you live in Blaenau Gwent? Have you got an idea for a community event growing food? Would £150 help? And then if it is, fill in this form. And it was like a Microsoft Office form with like 5 questions or something. But like I said a minute ago, it's like that digital exclusion, form filling, that's still a barrier for lots of people. So I work in the Housing Association, they host the food partnership, so really good links in the community. So I had the wellbeing team going out and helping groups that we know might not want to apply and seeing if they are interested. And the amount of like £150, it's not worth making it administratively onerous. So just keeping it as light as possible. So I've asked people just to send me photos, send me an invite to the event itself so I can come along and take part. And if they can, just write a short paragraph of what their experience was. And all I'm looking to do from that is just generate momentum, get some grassroots built into it, generating community activities around food, and just like we know the enthusiasm is there, and often a few £100 can just spark people into action. And it's like a quick turnaround. It's really good to see things come on, and then hopefully then they will stay in your network and be on board with your wider approach to the food system. Yeah, and so yeah, you get these savvy groups, and they've either got a paid member of staff, or you'll find there's a voracious grant-seeking counsellor on their team, and they just like it gets drawn to the same group. So trying to work out, it's a real difficult on sort of not this plant share grant, but we're trying to think about, do we regionalize the amount of money going to areas and things like that? But yeah, it's sort of the way that grant funding work. One of the negatives is you generate this competitive arena, and we want collaboration. And I do feel like with smaller grants, you do attract people who maybe haven't had funding before, and maybe £150 not worth it for these bigger organisations. And this round has been really popular with schools, and so I've got a load of new contacts with schools that I hadn't previously had. And there has been some, to contradict myself slightly, but a couple of the groups have pooled resources, which I'm really interested to see what impact that may. It does narrow the geographical impact, but I'm really interested to see how that plan works out, bringing their tribes together, and does that like spark more collaboration and have more ripples through the community. So yeah, that'll be really interesting to see. And yeah, small grant funding is sort of that helps people realize a pilot project and gives them sort of tests the waters, and maybe does spark that interest and enthusiasm to be more ambitious and launch more projects and more activities. And it's a really good way as a food partnership, like I say, worked with our partners Gavo on the guidance and distribution. And sort of as you build your partnership, you'll realize where your black spots are. Like, can you use small grants then to target that area? So we're working with an Iron Leisure Trust to sort of see if they can put on an activity in like a place where there's nothing going on at the moment. And then also we're identifying gaps in the area where people are using like third-party organisations to deliver in Blaenau Gwent, but that might mean the funding is then going out to Cardiff, for example. But we've got skills in Blaenau Gwent, and so can we reroute that funding help build capacity. So the money, the funding, the money being spent is sort of being spent in Blaen y Gwent and having that community benefit, really. Yeah, and I think Nikki sort of covered everything off, really. But yeah, I think from my point of view on that is sort of yeah, so the really small grants, just trying to keep it as light and breezy as possible. And I've been part of the local authority versions as well, and yeah, you can get a bit like stuck in the weeds and just trying to, like, if you're funding this project yourself, just thinking about how you're going to evaluate it, how you're going to, what do you really want to get from, like, what do you want to demonstrate with the funding you're spending, and then have that really clear in your minds before you issue the money, and then you can just sort of, you don't have to waste anyone's time, you save yourself a lot of time, and then you can build the picture of what impact your funding is having, and hopefully that'll demonstrate the good use and money well spent in your community.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. That was super useful. Just to touch on what Chris was saying, so with my other hat on, I'm a freelance grower, and my main contract is with a community garden, half-acre community garden, down near Swansea, which is a fantastic place. And we are in that position where we're applying for little pots of funding. We've had plant and share funding and cook and share funding before, which is £150. And actually, it sounds like such a small amount of money. I wouldn't underestimate what community groups can do with £150. So with our plant and share grant, we connected with a local school that has no funding themselves to do anything around growing in schools, but they've got teachers that are keen gardeners and the kids are really keen to grow. So we used that money to buy compost and seeds, and the kids walked down the canal path and came and spent the morning at the community garden, and they literally had like the best time. They'd never seen how like carrots grow, and like they were just like screaming, laughing when we're pulling them out the ground. And then since we've heard back from the school, and they're like, they've now assigned a little place at the school and asked for support in kind of building a growing space at the school and helping teach the teachers how to maintain that, which fits around their work schedule. So that was just from £150 towards some compost and seeds and a bit of our time. We've got a group of like 20 volunteers, that intergenerational connection as well. So a lot of our volunteers are retired. We've got people with additional needs who come from a care home with carers, and it's kind of bringing the community together for £150, which is absolutely fantastic. And again, building that network. But also talking about like the reporting side, we've had, you know, pots of money for £500, and the evaluation is so intense at the end, and the amount of questions that they're asking, you know, some want receipts, some don't, you know, some want like a log of everything. If you're sending through to me for £500 a massive evaluation document, you're going to get really short answers from me in that capacity, because, you know, we're strapped for time, and so it's better off thinking beforehand, like, what information do you need from people and in what capacity can they give it. So yeah, so that was my other hat on, just touching on, yeah, what Chris was saying. But yeah, some brilliant points there. Sam, should I pass on to you? Do you have any slides? Are you going to talk?
I do have slides,
Okay,
but I'm happy to
just let me just make you a presenter just in case. There you are. 1 second. There you go. If you want to share your slides, you can, or you can just talk, whatever you fancy.
So morning everybody, my name's Sam Evans. I'm the Sustainable Food Coordinator with RCT. I'm trying to do 2 things at once and it's not going well. I've been in post for about a year and a half now, 2 years, and there we go, here it is. And so, is that up? Everybody see? I can't see you. Can you see my slides? Yeah. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah,
perfect.
okay.
So I'm just going to be talking about the food support fund that we run through the communities team in RCT. So how it really came about, the food support fund is from the EU transition funding for food poverty, but it's also topped up through Travalis, the Housing Association as well, in partnership, and a few other funds that we brought in to maximise the money that we could give to groups. So it's to support really our community food projects in RCT. So we've got at present that we're aware of around 83 community food support projects. Quite a lot of those sort of established themselves during the pandemic and have sort of grown and continued on since then as we moved into the cost of living crisis. RCT on the food insecurity index, the Cynon Valley is #1 and then the Rhondda Valley is #4. So that's the two sort of areas of RCT, and then Taff-Ely down the bottom. But so there's a real need in our community, and there are lots of community organisations supporting residents with food support needs. So our grant then, it was a £500 grant, but groups could apply 3 times within the year, so it was quite a large grant in the end, working out at £1,500 for some groups that maximised the 3 lots of that. And so the our grant, the funding was all up front, so in the £500 tranche was all up front to the group. So it was, our aim was to make it as easy as possible for groups to access the funding, get the funding as soon as possible, and carry on the great work that they were doing. So we also used this as a way, because we started it as the partnership was developing, so it was a way sort of to bring people into the Sustainable Food Partnership and to sort of show the benefits and the advantages of being part of that network. So there was an online application portal and application form with 5 small questions on there. So it was as easy and as straightforward as we can be, but also trying to, well, ensuring that we're hitting all the guidelines and the requirements of the funding as well. So the eligible spend for our projects were directly for food costs or membership fees for FareShare, for example, or equipment and volunteer expenses, but salaries were an ineligible expense, just to make it as easy and straightforward as possible for us. So it was a very simple application process. You fill in the application form and then the recipient received a letter with the grant details and terms and conditions. If they were successful, sign and return the form with the conditions, and then a payment would be made to the applicant. And then it was the funding and the requirements for monitoring were just a brief report of their project and the invoices and photographic evidence, just as light touch as we possibly could be for £500, or, you know, but still sticking to that, ensuring that we're hitting all the criteria and having all the evidence. You know, some groups with the application form as well, those smaller ones that haven't, even though we tried to make it as straightforward and simple as possible, it still was some time invested from myself and other officers, just sitting down with groups that haven't applied for funding before, just helping them with the application form. These sort of ones are quite nice, easy ones really to just start people on that process of applying for grants if they haven't done so previously. And so, as I just touched on as well, Travalis Housing Association, we also partnered with them to, they match funded through their Welsh Procurement Alliance funding, just so that there wasn't duplication in funding. We're trying to work together to achieve the same goals. So that's just briefly touch on that. Just to do a bit of the reach and what we've achieved on some of our rounds. So we've done 3 different rounds of this now, and again we're hoping to launch it again in June after our Shared Prosperity Round 2 community grant closes. So we've just got 16 community groups on. I wanted to do a little snapshot that we supported with the Food Support Fund, and just a little statement there from Glenboy Community Centre, who provided free meals to children and then subsidised meals to adults. So it's supporting a huge range of projects, from community meals to food pantries to the more traditional sort of food bank kind of projects. But there was a whole range, as well as Grow Rhondda there, who did Grow Your Own sort of project, where they provided seeds and compost and windowsill plants, and then people took produce home to grow, as well as a food bag there of stuff. So it's another way of sort of providing that food support to communities. And so just the impact then thus far, we're trying not to double count people. So if they received one £500 grant or the three grants of 1,500 separately, we only counted the participants and the beneficiaries once. So we've got a minimum of 2,129 people in RCT that have benefited from a small grant. In this round, the amount of funding was £15,000 that we gave out, and there's our beneficiaries from that. So that small amount of money can have a huge impact on communities and residents. Sorry, I know I've rattled through that quite quickly, but I did want to just give the opportunity so we could have any questions from anybody, because you've heard us all talk. But if anyone wants to know anything else further, please do contact me. Thanks.
Brilliant, thanks Sam, that's really useful. There's some really good points that have been raised throughout those experiences, especially around, as we say, like reporting and requirements. There's things like health and safety and risk assessment, and you know, a lot of things that need to be in place before kind of going out to the public, to the communities, to businesses, whoever you're targeting. And just another couple of points to throw into the mix before we just have a couple of questions is making sure that the grant amounts that you're putting out are representative of what you're trying to get back out of it. So we've talked a lot here about kind of £150, £500 grants, which you can do an awful lot with on a community basis. But, you know, Nikki was talking about £15,000 grants, which actually, you know, the impact for that target audience is much more beneficial, much more long term. So it's taking a look at like what is needed in communities. I know a lot of people here are working in kind of the food poverty sector where this funding has landed. But if we're talking about partnership working across the system, Chris touched on, actually, is there a process of kind of joining up groups? So can they work with another group and they actually both get an amount of funding, but by working together that kind of doubles up that resource then. So that's really interesting as well. So yeah, just we've got 10-15 minutes for a couple of questions. I think Mary, you've got your hand up.
Hi. So I'm Powys, North Powys Sustainable Food Places, and our host, we're an independent organisation, so we sit outside of local government and stuff, and we've never been in a position where we're handing out the money. I'm quite used to applying for little applications. I loved what you said, Chris, about smaller amounts. I'm just wondering if there's anyone else in the network in a similar position to us that we could share do's and don'ts of how to get started in being the award body rather than applying. It's more an understanding of exactly what's needed in the background and the level of time and money and energy.
Oh, Chris.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to say is how we got the money out was just BACS transfers. So it was really quick and easy. But is Pavo on your partnership? Yeah. Unless anyone else has got something more useful, but I'd work with them on it because they do this all the time.
Yeah, that's what we're feeling, and who we'd want to partner with it on it. But yeah, this is all new territory at the moment.
Again, yeah, it's about making links with other people in your networks, in your partnerships that may have the tools and the resources to get that money out to people, which saves you having to do it. I know a lot of people here are in local authorities. There will be systems in place of getting money out. So make the use of those people and their expertise just giving, I would say, plenty of notice, as these things can be quite slow. And if we're talking about things around food, as Nikki mentioned, seasonality is a thing. You don't want to be giving out growing grants in November when there's no growing really happening. So yeah, just some planning ahead and making use of the resources that are available to you.
Just to add on that as well, one thing that has been a bit of a challenge is that we had to create all these new cost codes for my spending, which wasn't part of the Housing Association's way of working, which has been challenging. But yeah, so that might be one way. So to make sure you're tracking where all the money is being distributed and spent.
Right, and yeah, and also on that is kind of GDPR and data protection. If you've got bank details, and I know it's just something that seems straightforward, but I know we've had that with Plant and Share grants at Soil Association, going through checking with the data team that, you know, everything is stored in the right place, that you haven't got everybody's bank details on your desktop when you're doing things quickly to try and get really out to people fast, that there's actually a process around that. So Julie.
So, I haven't been in this job long. I've been about 3-4 weeks, and I've been phoning around different farmers just to see if they've got any land for allotments and things like that. But one farmer that I spoke to, he's currently selling eggs, and he's looking to open up a farm shop, and he just wanted advice and things. Would we be able to help him with things like that? Or would he have to go to a business, you know, because a business setup project?
Yeah, there's no restriction on the type of audiences that you're, you know, if you go down the small grants route, you can definitely help private businesses. For example, Nikki was saying about the farmers that she engaged with, that they're private businesses. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. As long as, you know, there's some useful advice there about maybe match funding to just show some commitment, or again, that they're clear on, you know, what the terms are, so that you've got a terms and conditions document for the grant, so they know, you know, what they can and can't spend it on, and how they set that up, what they need to report on, for example. But yeah, there's nothing stopping you helping private businesses with this funding if that's what's needed.
Okay, thank you.
Sinead?
Hi, yeah, sorry, just to cut across on that. I just think there's a huge amount of shared prosperity fund money out at this moment in time. And I know a lot of areas have actually identified business support grants here as well. So it might be worth your while, Julie, just to see what kind of funding is available in your area through shared prosperity fund to support private sector businesses. I know from a Pembrokeshire point of view, we've got a wide range of grants. And I know Nikki mentioned from a Torvine point of view, there's grants available there as well. So again, and it would probably be potentially more money than will be offered through this fund, and they will also then get that kind of business support that they may need to just do that kind of that help and support that emerging business will need. So just a bit of heads up on that one.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I would go to your economic development team within your county borough councils. Another project that we Torvine have launched, funded through the Shared Prosperity Fund, is Torvine Business Direct. So we're trying to get it like a one-stop shop, I guess, for local businesses, because it is so confusing out there at the moment. So it always has been. So when we advertised our grant, I'm lucky in terms of where my posts sit, because I sit in economy environment, so I've worked with the team for a long time anyway. So we put out an advert for them to contact Torvine Business Direct if interested, and then they refer on to me or whoever else, you know, within the team, so we can provide that one system of support. Anything that we don't know, obviously we can't be expertise in everything, so I do refer back to the team, work really closely with, say, Farming Connect in Business Wales as well, because they do a lot of free training events for farmers. So I'd make sure that your farmers are in contact with them as well in the first instance, because they might be able to get free, you know, lots of it is around training, it's how to do things, and there's a wealth of information out there for them.
Okay, thank you.
Great. There's also the round has just opened, I think, for the Welsh Government Horticulture Startup Scheme, which is £15,000. So I think they've done this is the second round of this that they've done, but specifically for people in horticulture, on that scale, kind of commercial, but can still be small, like CSAs and market garden style operations, £15,000 available, which can be towards machinery, which is obviously a big expense, and kind of infrastructure like polytunnels, which sometimes small grants can't provide because of assets and asset registers. But that has just opened, I think, in the last week or so. So it's kind of making people aware of this, but also maybe the funding that you have can support other funding that people can get from elsewhere. So are there any other questions before we wrap up today? No. Okay, there's one last thing I'll share with you. Let me just see if I can share my screen. It's for the last minute. This is being finalized at the moment. Please ignore my 10,000 tabs. This is how my brain operates. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can. I know it's only small, but I'll try and circulate it when it's been signed off. So this is basically through the Soil Association Food for Life Get-Togethers programme, which is coming to an end in May after 4 years of delivery. It's going through a legacy period of for 12 months, sharing, kind of disseminating all the research that's come out of it and all the good practice. They've run, as you heard us mention, plant and share grants and cook and share grants, which were £150 grants for communities, and also leadership grants of £500 and £1,000 for community activists and community groups to try out different pilots in their areas. University of West of England have done research alongside it, so they've monitored all the stats, all the feedback, all the results, how that money's been spent, the impact that that's had on communities. So there is a formal paper that's going to go out on that, which can be circulated, but it's not been signed off yet. But Andrea, who's part of the Get-Togethers team, sits on the Monmouthshire steering group, the Monmouthshire Food Partnership steering group, and she's put together this for them, which I'm sure we can circulate. So some tips on like kind of application processes, monitoring terms and conditions, how to promote small grants, sifting and the process applications. And this is everything that we went through with Plant and Share. And then I think sample copy, which may be of interest and speed things up for you, some wording on kind of how to say what funding is available and who can apply. And then, yeah, FAQs, acceptance emails, what to say to people who didn't get the grant, terms and conditions, so example terms and conditions, and obviously you've got health and safety considerations with a lot of the projects that we're working on. So that document is nearly ready to be disseminated. So I can share that when that's got the thumbs up to go out, if that's useful to anyone, just to get you going if you're looking at some small grants. So brilliant. I think that's it if there's no other questions. I say we'll have a meeting soon of partnership of the wider partnership network and see how everybody's getting on. I think we'll have a theme to kind of discuss. Welsh Government are going to attend that as well, just to observe and just see what everybody's up to, and answer some questions. So you'll get some information on that later today, hopefully. So thanks very much for coming this morning, and I'll catch up with you all soon. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, diolch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks,
Hannah.
Hannah. Take care.
Hannah. Oh, she gone? She's gone. Okay.